It changed the lives of many of us. And it also contributed to recharting the course of our struggle.
It's the reason that Sinn Féin has 37 TDs is because of those who ploughed what was a very difficult course from conflict to peace, those who gave their lives along the way.
The strength of Sinn Féin today, and north, south, east and west, is as a result of the sacrifices of those brave men and their families.
It was a huge thing for the people in Cavan Monaghan to elect Kieran as their TD.
Say every time I think about Kieran Doherty being elected as a TD, it's just amazing. From what we know, Kieran never set foot in either Cavan or Monaghan.
It was a remarkable achievement.
The success was far, far greater than we ever imagined.
One of the first TDs of our generation.
But yet the people who placed their number one vote beside their name, they were voting first of all in the hope that it would save his life. But secondly, they were voting for Kieran's vision.
Unfortunately though, as we now know, it did not save his life. Unfortunately, the government of the time did not care enough about their own citizens in the north and what the prisoners were going through at that time.
He was in his little cell on his own, and he was a shadow of himself. I told him that he would soon be dead, and that if he wanted, I would leave the blocks and announce that the hunger strike was over. And he paused for a moment and he said, "We haven't got our 5 demands, and that's the only way I'm coming off. Too much have suffered for too long, too many good men dead. Thatcher can't break us. Lan or I am not a criminal." And we shook hands firmly, and he said, "Thanks for coming in." And he continued to grip my hand. He said, "Don't worry, we get our 5 demands. We break Thatcher, Lan or I."
We're political prisoners! We want political status!
When one spends each day naked and crouching in the corner of a cell resembling a pigsty, staring at such eyesores as piles of putrefying rubbish, infested with maggots and flies, a disease-ridden chamber pot, or a blank, disgusting, scarred wall, it is to the rescue of one's sanity to be able to rise and gaze out of a window at the world. Today, the screws began blocking up all the windows with sheets of steel. To me, this represents the further torture of the tortured, blocking out the very essence of life, nature. Here, my torturers have long ago started and still endeavour to block up the window in my mind.
Kieran was 25 when he died on hunger strike. He was the 3rd son in a family of 6 children. His 2 older brothers, Michael and Terence, were interned between 1972 and 1974. And Kieran has 2 younger sisters, Roisin and Mairead, and a younger brother, Brendan. And of course, Margaret, the Protestant woman from the Shankill who married Alfie, the Catholic man from the Falls, and they went on to enjoy each other's company for a very, very long time. He was very influenced by what happened in Belfast particularly, and in Derry, but particularly in Belfast where he lived, by what happened here in 1969 and the pogroms of that time. And he joined the Féin in the autumn of 1971, and he was interned. He was just 17 in 73 until 1975, and in fact he was one of the last internees released. That's when I got to know Kieran during that period in Long Kesh. He was rearrested again in 1976 in August, and he was sentenced to 18 years in 1978. And he joined the blanket protest. He became a fluent Irish speaker. You know, when he joined the hunger strike, and this was a young man of 25, he had spent 7 of the previous 10 years in prison. So he joined the hunger strike in May the 22nd in 1981. And then in June, famously, he was elected as TD for Cavan Monaghan. He gained 9,121 first preference votes. And even yet, I want to thank every one of those 9,121 voters who voted for him. And God knows how many people gave him a second or a third preference. He was actually only 303 votes behind the then sitting Minister of Education. And Caoimhghín was his Director of Elections, and Charlie Boylan was his election agent.
I was Director of Elections for Kieran Doherty in that campaign leading to Election Day on the 11th of June of 1981. Charlie Boylan, my close friend and political colleague, was election agent for Kieran. Between us and the very effective directorate that we had established right across these two counties led to Kieran's election success with 9,121 votes.
When the decision was made to contest the general election of 1981 and to field anti-H-Block candidates, I was asked to act as election agent for one of the hunger strikers, Kieran Doherty. We took on that challenge, and the success was far, far greater than we ever imagined. Kieran Doherty, of course, along with many others, had made a decision to stop the Thatcher campaign to criminalise the Republican prisoners in Long Kesh and also the women prisoners in Armagh. And as we canvassed throughout Cavan Monaghan, we realised that the people were fully behind the prisoners and the hunger strikers. The election itself, of course, brought back memories, great memories and sad memories to me, because I was election agent for Kieran Doherty, and on the day of the count we were actually thrilled by the massive vote and the number of people who came out and gave their number one to the prisoners, and that was happening all over the country in various other constituencies.
It was a remarkable achievement. People had voted for a Republican candidate, a prisoner candidate, out of a real sense of identification with the cause. There would not be a criminalisation of Ireland's struggle and right to freedom, to justice and to peace. And people responded to that in great numbers, following on what had happened in Fermanagh and South Tyrone a short number of weeks before, and the election of Bobby Sands. We were absolutely over the moon with the success of Kieran's election.
I'll talk about the hunger strike and my memories of the time, because they are very clear. I suppose I came from a political family, so I was always acutely aware of politics in the north. But I became more aware and more interested in 1981 It was a time of, I suppose, heightened tension. It was a time when my family were extremely busy, engaged in the campaign to elect Kieran Doherty. My parents and my older siblings were constantly on the road canvassing for him, speaking at church gates. I even helped to write labels in order to send literature out to people on the register at the time. We attended marches all the time in Cavan, where our black flag was hanging outside the house. We were fully sure that if we elected Kieran Doherty a TD, and hopefully other hunger strikers and prisoners at the time, that we would save his lives and the lives of his comrades, and that there'd be no way that an Irish government would let a member of their own parliament die. So there was great excitement that we managed to elect him, and that he got such a high vote here in Cavan Monaghan. We were extremely proud of him and proud of what we had achieved in this county.
It amazes me every day, I have to say. Every time I think about Kieran Doherty being elected as a TD, it's just amazing. From what we know, Kieran never set foot in either Cavan or Monaghan. Yet the people of this constituency elected him, a very young lad from Belfast, as a chop to Dáil, and it always strikes me when I think about it, because when you're involved in an electioneer, and I suppose the instinctive thing for people to ask you on the door is, what can you do for me? People who were asking others to vote for Kieran Doherty could offer nothing, but yet the people who placed their number one vote beside their name, they were voting first of all in the hope that it would save his life, but secondly they were voting for Kieran's vision.
And I and many others campaigned in that election, and indeed throughout the constituencies in the 26 counties where H-Block and Armagh women candidates put their names forward. So it was a huge thing for the people in Cavan Monaghan to elect Kieran as their TD.
Unfortunately, though, as we now know, it did not save his life. Unfortunately, the government of the time did not care enough about their own citizens in the north and what the prisoners were going through at that time to intervene and put pressure on the British government to give them their demands and stop the hunger strike.
At the conclusion of the count, I made the acceptance speech on behalf of Kieran Doherty, and I appealed to the 4 TDs who were elected alongside Kieran Doherty, John Wilson, Tom Fitzpatrick, Rory O'Hanlon and John F. Conlon, to take up the issue of the conditions in Long Kesh and the 5 demands which the prisoners were making. Unfortunately, none of them made any effort to bring about a resolution to the problem.
All of us hoping that this would help to create a new awareness, a new willingness, and certainly an action on the part of the political establishment in this state. But sadly, it wasn't forthcoming. And the people's wishes and the people's support for not only Kieran Doherty in June of 1981, but for Paddy Aghaidh in County Louth, both of them returned, and for many others right across this state who secured magnificent returns from their candidature.
Eventually, Kieran Doherty died after 74 days of hunger strike, and our feelings at that time were very emotional, and we will always remember the massive funeral in Belfast, the massive crowds who turned out, and the great sympathy amongst the people for the families, and we must remember the families of all the hunger strikers. But Margaret and Alfie Doherty created a bond, I think, with the people of Cavan Monaghan that remains to this day.
Kieran's parents, Alfie and Margaret, were exceptional. They were leaders among the families during those months of the hunger strike. His brothers, Michael, Terence and Brendan, a very young man at that time, his sisters, Rushin and Margaret, they were all very, very special people, supporting their son, supporting their brother. And that was replicated across all the families of those who died. They were incredible and magnificent people who were responding in exceptional times with great dignity, with great resolve, and deservedly winning the respect and the support of men and women, young and old, the length and breadth of this island and internationally.
The family were very close to the hearts and minds of the people here in Cavan Monaghan, and I think that played a big role in the great success of the election.
Alfie and Margaret came to Monaghan on many, many occasions, as did Kieran's siblings. A friendship, a rapport developed that lasted throughout the remainder of their lifetimes, and we are all enriched by the experience of having got to know them, though we had never had the chance to meet and get to know their special son, Kieran.
One of the first TDs of our generation, and I'm very proud of him, and as I've said, particularly very proud of those who voted for him and who worked for him in that summer of 1981. The last time I saw Big Doc was in July 1981. I was with Owen Corran and Seamus Ruddy visiting the hunger strikers, and I'm going to read now what I wrote at that time. We went and spoke to Tom McElwee, to Lawrence McKeown, to Matt Devlin, and then I went down to talk to Doc, because he was too weak to join the others. And he was in his little cell on his own, and he was a shadow of himself. This was a tall man, athletic, very, very fit young man. He was propped up on one elbow, his eyes unseeing, and he looked massive in his gauntness as his eyes, fierce in defiance, scanned my face. And I spoke to him quietly and slowly. I told him that he would soon be dead, and that if he wanted, I would leave the blocks and announce that the hunger strike was over. And he paused for a moment and he said, "We haven't got our 5 demands, and that's the only way I'm coming off. Too much have suffered for too long, too many good men dead. Thatcher can't break us. Lan or I am not a criminal." And we spoke for a few minutes, and I still, as you can tell, get very emotional, even all this time on. And we shook hands firmly, and he said, "Thanks for coming in." "I'm glad we had that wee yarn. Tell everyone, tell all the lads I was asking for them." And he continued to grip my hand. He said, "Don't worry, we get our 5 demands. We break Thatcher, Lan or I."
We all used to run about, play football, Gaelic and stuff. And I knew him going to the local discos and stuff. But I knew him from about 12, I would say, I knew Kieran. And the way everybody knows everybody in their general area. And then as we're getting into our teens, we used to hang around with the same general set of friends, got to know each other better, and we've been in the same group. And then I was in the Féin, and Kieran's part of Anderson's town. And but in fact, he actually moved up into my part of Anderson's town to operate. But the two of us were interned together. In fact, the two of us were released together on the same day. Went home in the bus on the same day. But Kieran, as a person, very impressive person. He was about 6'2", good-looking guy. He was built like a Roman statue. He had about a 42, 44 chest and about a 30 waist. He just felt like that. He was really impressive and frightening if you were a screw because you were seeing him with his shirt off. So he was stand out. He was quite quiet, you know, he didn't, he could hold his counsel until he was asked. When we're on the protests, Kieran probably would have been quite committed to it, quite staunch about it, as was probably were the vast majority of everybody who was on it. But Kieran was always for a hunger strike. He believed that the hunger strike would be the making and breaking of the blanket protest, the criminalisation issue. He spent hours upon hours learning the Irish, studied the Irish inside out, a fluent Gaelgoer. He's also a very sporty character, you know, in his younger days, and a cyclist. He was into the cycling too, as his brothers were into the cycling as well. But on a personal level, one of the things that I love about the Kieran Doherty story was that he met a girl and fell in love. That sounds a wee bit corny or something, and people say that happens every day. But in those days, IRA men didn't really, romance wasn't top of their list, so to speak. He just stumbled into this. I don't want to say the girl's name, but we call her Gerry, and he was madly in love with her. That was a period, that was personal happiness, which I was delighted to see that Kieran managed to experience it in life, you know, given that his whole life up to that point was dedicated to the struggle. So it was good to see that there, and I don't know, maybe it's a bit strange or something. It's always something I was glad to see he got the experience. On the blanket itself, in relation to a lot of his comrades, Kieran would have been looked up upon. People would have seen Kieran as a tower of strength, which he was, because he took no nonsense from the screws. Absolutely, he had been one of the most feared prisoners in the H-Blocks, without a shadow of a doubt. Anybody will tell you, the screws feared him, and rightly so. And probably his sort of quiet and serene demeanour probably added to that, because once he took that shirt off to go out on a visit or something, them boys knew this guy's well put together here. He could cause you trouble, so let's just not visit any trouble upon him, you know. He was just a lovely fella, just a no airs or graces about him whatsoever. Respected. Like, it's very difficult to have respect from your peers at such a young age. You don't get that until you're a lot older. But Kieran had it then.
Honnig acne agam Kieran Doherty dús. Nir honnig me go G block a car. Mi mata ní jig seachta a ní. Agus bhí aithne níos far agam nir a scilús ir me mi fiara ní jig achta a hían. Níos lú na mi ó hús an starcocris. Far mór smínse tiscina bhí an. Bhí sim aige in acrod Ernach, Changa, Common Lú Class Gael, Ceol Árán déanta airne agus mar sin de. Sulla bhfuil mé ar dús le Doc mór, híl mé gur farnaí sinne a bhí an. Mar gur thula mé go raibh sé i measc na cimí cúgaí a cur ceis fada tríhinne 1974. Mar a dúirt mé fearcún a bhí an, ach nuair a duscail sé a bhíal, bhí gach duine ag éisteach leis, mar bhí meas mór ag gach duine leis, agus meas fásta ag a cuid thuairimí. Fear tuiscine a bhí an. Thula mé Kieran ag caint go minic le daoine, a bhí ag dul trí druch amana, agus Kieran ag tabhairt a cuid láideach agus cóirde dó. Fear smíonna a bhí an, go bhrá leis cluiche fichilaí a imirt, seampín an scíhan, ach nuair a bhí muid ag imirt uair nó go, bhí mise an búitear, agus bhí mé bróide leis sin. Ní raibh aoine uairm gur tháinig sé ar stealc ocrais ar son a cairde, mar bhíos ag gach duine a bhfuil leis gur fear cróga agus dingháilte é. Bhí mé an-róidúil as bhainte muoineachán agus Caoláin, nuair anam nniu siad Kieran ina éarthóir mar theachta déile, ach bhí mé aontacht bróidúil as mar ceantar féin, nuair a héithú chun na déile é. Bhí anar agus privilege orm go raibh aithní agam air. Suaimhneas Gerry dó.
I have it to say that I was honoured to be asked to deliver the oration at Kieran's funeral in Milltown Cemetery. He died on the 2nd of August 1981, just the day after Kevin Lynch died also on hunger strike. It was, for me, a first experience, but it was a great, great honour to stand at the graveside and pay tribute to one of Ireland's greatest H-Blocks, one of Ireland's greatest patriots.
The hunger strikes themselves, it brought a new realisation, I think, to the Republican struggle, and it sowed the seeds of the later success of Sinn Féin. And I'm fully convinced that the strength of Sinn Féin today, and north, south, east and west, is as a result of the sacrifices of those brave men and their families.
Always something I think we should remember, and it's certainly always something on my mind whenever I'm campaigning and whenever we're involved in elections, that elections are much more about winning seats. They're about selling a big vision, and I have to say I'm also very proud that when we're engaged in politics, that it's the exact same vision that drives us, that drove Kieran Doherty and his comrades.
I suppose I would always credit that time, though, with being the time when, politics became much more important in the struggle for Irish independence and unity. It was a time when we realised that we could achieve something politically, and we started from then in these counties and throughout the country to organise ourselves and to organise the party and to contest elections. And we started to see results very quickly in Monaghan, saying council elections. And my comrade Charlie Boylan, of course, had been elected before that and continued to be for a time after. It had finally accumulated in Caoimhghín Caoláin taking a seat in 1997.
Clearly, the hunger strike period itself was incredibly traumatic for all of those involved. But one of the positives that came out of it was the creation of a new politically aware community of Republicans, and nowhere more evident than Cavan Monaghan. So the people who were behind Kieran Doherty's election campaign in 1981 would be the first to tell you that they were naive, they were inexperienced when it came to elections. But the experience that they gained out of all of that crystallised into a strong Sinn Féin party in these counties that eventually culminated in this same constituency being the constituency that elected the first Sinn Féin TD of modern times, the first Sinn Féin TD to take their seat in Leinster House in Caoimhghín Caoláin, and in turn helped in this year to elect two Sinn Féin TDs, and myself and Pauline Tully.
I think that it changed the lives of many of us. And it also contributed to recharting the course of our struggle. And we are where we are today because of the sacrifice, the courage, the commitment, the selflessness of the 10 who died and those who stood with them through those heady months of 1981. Kieran Doherty was the 8th to die on hunger strike that year. He went for 73 days, the longest of the 10. He was a big man. He was known as Big Duck. I never had the privilege, the honour of meeting him personally. I don't think any of our number here in Cavan Monaghan had that opportunity. But what he has contributed to all our individual lives and the collective of our struggle and course of struggle here in these counties has been enormous.
So I see myself very much part of Kieran Doherty's legacy and the fruits of Kieran Doherty's sacrifice. Of course, the only real fruits that we want to deliver, the only real commemoration that we want to deliver for Kieran Doherty is a united Irish Republic. But I think that's within our grasp now. Thanks in much part to the strength and the political strength of Sinn Féin. But that in turn is thanks to the sacrifices of people like Kieran Doherty.
The strength of Sinn Féin today and north, south, east and west is as a result of the sacrifices of those brave men and their families, and no doubt they will be remembered. And when history comes to be written of that period, the part played by those brave men will be on a par with the 1916 and various other episodes in Irish history.
Every single day of my political life, I spare a moment for Kieran Doherty, not in any sentimental way necessarily, but to recognise that we're standing on the shoulders of giants. The reason that Sinn Féin has 37 TDs is because of those who ploughed what was a very difficult course from conflict to peace, those who gave their lives along the way. And every time I see the Kieran Doherty mural in the Sinn Féin rooms in Leinster House, every time I walk into the Dáil chamber knowing that Kieran Doherty, when his name was first read out as being elected, was languishing in the H-Blocks and very soon afterwards was lying in a hospital bed where he gave his life surrounded by his family. All of that is part of our story, and I think it's a really important story to be told.
Kieran's name is not only a part of the 10, he is one of the 22 who have died on hunger strike throughout all these years, from Terence McSweeney all the way to Bobby Sands and Kieran Doherty, the 3 of the 22 who are all elected representatives. From Thomas Ashe to Mickey Devine, the first and the last to die of those 22. Each of those men gave exceptional service to the cause that they embraced and the beliefs that they held so strongly.
So folks, these are the shoulders of the giants that we stand on today. We have a good bit of the road travelled, with a bit of the road to complete. This is the decade of opportunity. This is the decade for us to bring about an end to the union with Britain. Kieran didn't have a peaceful way to do that. We do. The mechanism is there for us. It's a doable project. You folks in Cavan Monaghan know how to do even undoable projects. So let's bend our will, let's celebrate those who passed before us, and let's bring an end to the English connection and take a step forward into Irish unity and the real republic. Lán Aghaidh.
I'll tell you of an Irishman who still could be alive, but he gave his life for Ireland at the age of 25. Brought up in a Belfast home, he learned his history well, and he gave his life for freedom in a dreary H-Block cell. And we never will forget you, your spirit wild and free, and we salute you, brave Kieran Doherty, Cavan Monaghan TD. Inspired by your heroes and how McSweeney died, you join a Féin Éireann, a young man full of pride, arrested by the British that took your brothers too. Your spirit was undaunted, you would fight for what was true. And we never will forget you, your spirit wild and free, and we salute you, brave Kieran Doherty, Cavan Monaghan TD. From the ranks of na Féin, you became a volunteer, loyal to your comrades, you showed no type of fear. Arrested by the British on a mission that went wrong, you were sentenced to the H-Blocks for 20 years and more. And we never will forget you, your spirit wild and free, and we salute you, brave Kieran Doherty, Cavan Monaghan TD. In the lonely cells of H-Block, your spirits never waned, your mind was always active, your strategy was planned. You joined a group of volunteers determined in their ways, and you gave your life on hunger strike after 72 days. And we never will forget you, your spirit wild and free, and we salute you, brave Kieran Doherty, Cavan Monaghan TD. And how we mourn your passing, the flags flew at half-mast. You'll always be remembered in the hills around Belfast. How 10 brave Irish rebels brought England to her knees. You won the fight for prisoners' rights and restored their dignity. And we never will forget you, your spirit wild and free, and we salute you, brave Kieran Doherty, Cavan Monaghan.